Hey everyone, we are starting live here. I know we're about a minute early, so let's see what we can get going here. Um, again, just want to give a shout out to everybody that's been supporting this and all of you that are been coming on and joining me every night. I really appreciate it. So we're going to get on with chapter 6 tonight, and um, let's see where it takes us. All of you who have read it, remember any of the proceeds. Well, let me do one thing real quick. We are going to be coming out with we're going to be doing a Shadow Warrior shirt with 9 line. And um, all the proceeds are going to be going towards Shadow Warriors project. So I'll let you know when that shirt's going to be up and ready, but it's not yet. But soon enough it will. Probably, hopefully by next Wednesday, or maybe the following Friday we can get that up and going. But I'll let you know what it's going to look like, and hopefully we can get a bunch of people out there that want to buy that shirt. Also, want to remind everybody the first 1,000 people who do a reoccurring donation to shadowwarriorsproject.org for $20. We'll get a free autographed book sent to them. And otherwise, let's get started. And we're looking forward to this. Thank you much. Chapter 6 is Gunfighter Road. The reason the road, we called it Gunfighter, this isn't, I don't know if this was in the book yet, but is that's a place where we'd had a few gunfights before, so we amply named it Gunfighter Road. It's that super secret CIA code words that we all use out there. But hey, upon driving into the annex, Oz headed directly to Building C. There he found Bob, the base chief, and several other agency staffers standing outside, talking on their cell phones. Oz's dinner companion rushed from the Toyota and went inside Building C to find out what was happening. Other annex staffers roamed the walled property, moving at will from building to building. Some grabbed personal belongings from their living quarters. To Oz, several annex residents seemed caught up in all the commotion, unsure of where to go or what to do. This is going to be like herding cats, Oz thought. His body armor were in his room, but there wasn't time for that. Still in the brown pants and long-sleeved collared shirt he'd worn to dinner, Oz strode directly to Bob and swamped him with questions. What's the latest? Did the guys take enough weapons? Where? Exactly. Is everyone who's still here? Bob hurriedly brought Oz up to speed, then returned to his phone calls. Oz didn't object, understanding that Bob needed to help coordinate the response, deal with the Feb 17 militia, update Washington and Tripoli on the ongoing attack. As he looked around the annex, an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. From the way people were milling around, it seemed as though it hadn't occurred to them that the compound might not be the only target for violent anti-American extremists. Defenses needed to be organized and hardened immediately at the annex, and the job fell to me as the only GRS operator not en route to the compound. Even as I swept into action, I tamped down that gnawing sense of frustration and disappointment that had begun during the drive back from dinner. Years earlier, my wife had given me a t-shirt with the question on the front, do you know the difference between you and me? And the answer was on the back. So, you're running away from fire, and I'm running toward it. I wore that shirt proudly and lived by its message. Now, though, as the only operator not on the on the compound rescue squad, I kind of felt sidelined. I'd rather be taking the fight to them instead of sitting here waiting for them to come to me. I don't want to be blocking and tackling. I want to be running the football to the end zone. That's just the way we're built. I knew I couldn't dwell on those thoughts, so I occupied my mind and devoted my energy to devising an improvised defensive plan using the limited assets and personnel that I had on hand. Although all the CIA case officers at the annex had some training and familiarity with weapons, I considered most of them ill equipped for combat. In other words, they're all non shooters. I took a mental roll call and concluded that the core team consisted of 6 fighters with varying degrees of military experience and training, 3 Americans and 3 Libyans. The Americans were myself, the head of annex security, and a case officer who'd had some combat experience in Afghanistan. The 3 Libyans were the annex guards, and all of them were friends or family members of the property landlord, who insisted that they be hired when the Americans rented the annex. Although I would rely on the 5 men, honestly, I really considered everyone at the annex to be my responsibility alone, and that weighed heavy on my mind. I directed the remaining Americans at the annex to converge on Building C. There, the reinforced sensitive compartmented information facility, also known as the SCIF, could serve as their last refuge if the annex was overran. I posted an annex support staffer outside Building C with an assault rifle and told him to make sure no one went to another building at a time, and only if absolutely necessary. That way, I wouldn't have to round up more than 1 straggler in the event of an emergency. I knew that cell phone service was spotty inside Building C, so I told the staffer to allow anyone making calls to loiter outside as long as they stayed close. When Bob, the annex chief, took a brief pause between calls, I asked him to help enforce the rule about keeping everyone integrated and congregated in and around Building C. Bob, I said, my biggest concern is accountability. I need to know where everybody's at all times. Bob agreed with me. And with the base chief's blessing, the gun-wielding staffer took his place as the door monitor. I hurried across the driveway to Building B, ducking into my bedroom to collect my kit. Without changing clothes, I pulled out my body armor, a helmet, and my night vision goggles. I grabbed my assault rifle and my go bag, which contained about a dozen extra magazines, 2 or 3 extra tourniquets, and other medical gear. Determined to not run out of ammo, I swept up a half dozen spare mags and shoved them into my rear and side pockets as I ran back outside. Carrying his own assault rifle, the case officer with military experience in Afghanistan spotted Oz and asked how he could help. I directed him to a ladder on the northeastern corner of Building C. The ladder led to the flat cement roof with a 3.5-foot high cinder block parapet that could be used as cover. In the months previous, the operators, all of us, had designed an annex defense plan under which we'd use Building C rooftop as our primary fighting position. On that rooftop were sealed green metal cans with thousands of rounds of ammunition, including linked rounds for a belt-fed machine gun, magazines for our assault rifles, and grenades that resembled oversized salt shakers to be used with a grenade launcher. The plan called for the weapons to be brought up when the fight began, to keep them from getting gummed up with sand and dust. I climbed to the roof with the military-trained case officer for a look around. To the northwest, in the direction of the compound, I could see bright flashes from tracer rounds streaking across the night sky. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary in the immediate vicinity of the annex, so I scanned the surrounding area through my night vision. Couldn't see anyone trying to sneak up on us from the desolate area to the north and east that we called Zombieland. Told the case officer to remain atop the roof on sentry duty and let me know by radio if he heard or saw anything unusual. So I climbed down and continued my rounds. I positioned the annex security leader at the front gate, gave him leeway to move back and forth between that and Building C, some 60 yards away. I felt confident in the man's judgment and knew that he'd make the right decision about where to be. The priority, we both knew, was to protect people in Building C. If attackers breached the annex walls and came gunning for them, we needed all the shooters inside the building. A position of relative strength if invaders tried to enter through doors, one or two at a time. With the case officer and the security leader in place, I went to work arranging the outer line of defense. The 3 Libyan guards. Months earlier, the operators, we had built several steel platforms close to the annex walls to use as fighting positions if we came under attack. The floors of the rusty orange-brown platforms were high enough to enable us or other annex defenders to shoot over the walls. The platforms, which we called towers, were large enough for 2 of us to move and crouch comfortably without knocking each other off. I positioned one of the Libyan guards on a tower near the front gate. Put one on a tower in the rear left of Building C. Placed the third on a tower in the southeastern corner of the property. I moved from one to the next to be sure the guards had enough ammo and were prepared to fight. At the very least, I hoped that they'd hold their position and warn me of an attack. I walked around inside the annex, heard the radio traffic between operator teammates and the DS agents inside the compound over at the consulate. I was too busy to focus on everything they said, but I could tell that it didn't sound good. After positioning the men in the towers, I returned to Building C, still hoping that the local Libyan guards were brave and loyal enough not to flee at the first sign of trouble. I had the same thought, though, about the 17th Fed militiamen who were supposed to support my friends at the compound. And as I organized the annex defenses, a supervisor of the 3 Libyan guards came to the front gate asking to speak with Bob. Annex staff members were familiar with carrying his pistol. The guard supervisor told me that he'd come to the annex to urge us and the base chief to evacuate immediately. He said, "You guys got to go," he told me. "It's not safe for you here." I took him to Building C to see Bob, and then returned to my duties while the guard supervisor and the base chief spoke outside. But I already knew the outcome. 6 operators and a translator from our office, from the annex, were en route to a burning, overrun diplomatic compound where an ambassador and 6 other Americans were in mortal danger. If some or all of those 14 Americans made it out alive, they'd need a place to take refuge. The men and women at the annex, they were not going anywhere. Near the southeast corner of the intersection of Gunfighter Road and the gravel street leading up to the compound, which I called Consulate Road. Again, one of those super secret code words that the agency came up with for the roads, in case people listened into our radio traffic, they wouldn't know where we're at. Tonto and DB and the 2 young 17th Feb militiamen approached the wall they intended to climb. With any luck, it would lead them to a tall building they could use as a sniper roost and reconnaissance tower, give them some oversight. into the compound. Tonto remained apprehensive about the Feb 17 fighters, but he sensed these two were trustworthy. As the sniper observation team moved out, Roan, Jack, and Tig left the BMW and headed toward the intersection. Cement blocked walls surrounded most of the homes and other properties in the area, so the operators used the walls as cover. They moved cautiously north up Gunfighter in a low ready position, rifle butts at their shoulders, barrels pointed safely downward. Index fingers stayed close to the triggers but not on them. Thumbs caressed the safety switches, ready to make the weapons hot. Roan approached the driver's side of the technical truck with the mounted Dishka. Taking cover behind the engine block, Jack stationed himself on the southeast corner of the intersection. Ambient light from homes and the occasional flickering streetlight made his night vision goggles unnecessary for the moment. Jack poked his head around the corner to peer toward the front gate of the compound, 400 yards down the gravel street. He got his first look at some of the attackers who'd stormed the compound and were now shooting in his direction. He saw 8 or 9 Arab men, at least some with weapons visible. Sometimes the attackers fired at them, at the operators, and the Feb 17 militiamen from behind the concrete Jersey barrier outside the consulate gate. Other times they milled around in the open. They were too far away for Jack to identify them. All he could see were shadowy figures moving near the gate. Suddenly, Jack heard loud gunfire coming from close by. One of the militiamen fired several large caliber rounds from the technical in the direction of the compound. The knuckle draggers could feel the shockwaves of the shots reverberating in their chests. Roan moved around the truck and Jack leaned around the corner to join in the shooting. After firing several rounds, they ducked back behind cover. 3 Feb 17 militiamen who occupied the northeast corner of Gunfighter Road and the gravel street returned the attackers' fire as well. The attackers answered with pops of sporadic gunfire. As Tig moved to join in, a 17 side of Gunfighter fired 2 rocket-propelled grenades toward the men outside the compound gate. The grenade-firing militiaman was positioned about 20 yards behind Tig, who heard the alarming sound of shells whizzing over his head. The grenades didn't faze the attackers, who kept firing. Well, Tig answered with added firepower. He brought a grenade launcher of his own, and he fired 3 high explosive dual-purpose cartridges capable of killing anyone within a 5-yard radius and wounding anyone within 15 yards. Each round launched with a resounding thump, followed by a momentary silence, punctuated by a powerful cocoon explosion. The launcher had a range of about 350 yards at a point target, but Tig purposefully lobbed the grenades short to put the explosives well in front of the attackers and to avoid hitting the compound gate. He worried that a direct hit on the gate would slow them down, exposing them to fire. So when it came time for them to move through to reach the compound, while the operators couldn't see if Tig's grenades injured or killed men outside the compound, but there was no doubt that the powerful rounds cleared them out. The gunfire from the attackers toward Gunfighter Road stopped. Then the operators looked down the street after Tig's third shot. No one stood between them and the main gate. It was time to move in. First, Tig rushed back toward the car to get his assault rifle, a belt-fed machine gun, and 200 rounds of ammunition. With more than enough to carry, he left his go bag in the BMW. As Tig collected his gear, he heard a DS agent repeat his radio plea. "We are going to die if you don't get here," the agent said, choking out the words and struggling to breathe. After that firefight, the GRS team leader and Henry, the translator, resumed talking with the 17th Feb commander. The discussions focused on coordinating of the combined forces and the possibility that the militia would provide heavy weapons for a counterassault, a prospect that seemed to be going nowhere. Tig listened as the team leader and Henry, the translator, discussed their conversation with the militia commander. The commander had told him that he didn't want to move his troops toward the compound gate. Instead, he told the TL he'd make a phone call to the attackers to negotiate for the release of the trapped Americans. Tig wondered how the militia commander knew whom to call and how he was on good enough terms with someone connected to the attackers to think he could work out a deal. One positive development of the talks was that the 17th Fed militiamen finally appeared ready to set up roadblocks at all intersections leading to the compound to prevent the attackers from calling in reinforcements and overwhelming the 14 Americans. 7 from the compound and 7 from the Annex Quick Reaction Force, who'd be there. With no sign that the militia would move beyond the perimeter of the battle, Tig, Roan, and Jack were done waiting. "Fuck it," Tig said. "We're going." Roan called Tonto by radio. "Hey guys, we're going to start moving on foot. What are you seeing, Tonto?" Tonto and DB had the two militiamen had yet to reach high ground. So Tonto radioed back, "I think you're fine. I'm not hearing much fire coming down the road anymore." "The consulate is definitely on fire. It's in blazes. Just do your thing. Shoot, move, and communicate, and you'll be good." "Roger that." Tig radioed the annex to let Bob and the others know that they were moving out. Leaning forward, guns up, Roan, Jack, and Tig rounded the corner onto the potholed 2-lane gravel street leading to the compound. They hugged the wall on the south side that led to entranceways or marked the separation between properties. Alternating the lead position, watching each other's backs and exposing themselves as little as possible, Roan, Tig, and Jack bobbed in and out of 2 construction sites, moving steadily through the dark toward the compound. Their muscles tensed as they scanned from side to side. With each step, they expected to encounter the enemy. Jack's contacts had finally cleared enough for him to see straight. But in the confusion of the firefight, he momentarily lost his bearings. He called to Tig. "Is the gate on the left or the right?" Tig told him it was on the right, and Jack reoriented himself. Tig had his own vision problems, caused by the weather. The temperature had reached 84 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and the night was only a dozen or so degrees cooler. As Tig's body overheated from exertion, his goggles fogged so much he found them useless and lifted them to his helmet. About 150 yards down the street, the 3 operators come across an unarmed man in his 40s, talking on the cell phone. Wearing long pants and a polo shirt, the man seemed to have wandered out of one of the homes to see what was happening, as though a parade was passing by. Get down," the guy said. The man pointed at his phone and kept talking. The operators concluded that he might be a threat to himself, but not to them. Shaking their heads and shooting him dirty looks, they kept moving. Jack and Tig heard voices speaking Arabic in clipped, urgent tones. They glanced to their left and saw a movement on the opposite side of the street, 15 or 20 yards behind them. Fuck, Jack thought. Who the hell are these guys? Well, with a quick look, he realized that the three men posed no danger. To the contrary, they were the operators, self-appointed backup. The men were the militiamen who'd returned fire at attackers from the northeast corner of the intersection. Now they were shadowing the operators' movements on the opposite side of the street. Jack and Tig noticed that the militiamen learned from the Americans as they went, slipping in and out of construction sites and entranceways as they sought cover moving east. Jack didn't really know how useful the trio would be, but at least they were there. After all the uncertainty, at least 5 members of the Feb 17 Martyrs Brigade had fulfilled the promise to support the American Quick Reaction Force. 3 on the gravel road and 2 searching for a sniper location with Tonto and DB. Ahead, the 3 operators saw a large mound of dirt outside a construction site, about 100 yards from the compound gate. Jack and Tig looked to the peak, more than 15 feet high, and had the same thought: vantage point. Having a sniper in position from the street as they moved into the compound would provide them with cover fire and a tactical advantage. They hoped that the dirt pile was firm, but as soon as Jack and Tig began to climb, they felt like they were scaling a sand dune. Their legs sank to their knees as they trudged higher. Each man carried 40 or more pounds of weapons, ammo, body armor, and equipment, and the weight seemed to grow with every step. Son of a bitch, Tig said, his breast growing labored. Jack felt winded too, and he assumed that he was worse off than his partner. He knew that Tig's workouts included long runs around the annex, so Jack blamed himself for focusing on his upper body strength and neglecting his lower limbs. Man, Jack said halfway up, sweating buckets and huffing for breath, I need to do more legs. But Tig felt equally smoked. His long runs had left his legs muscles sore. Man, he panted, I should be running a lot less. Both men coughed out a laugh. As they reached the top, Tig and Jack discovered that they weren't high enough to see inside the compound walls. They'd climbed the mound for nothing, doubling their frustration as they slid down. The ammo drum on Tig's belt-fed machine gun fell off. They had no time to reattach it, so Tig went Rambo style. He broke off more than 100 rounds from the lost drum and split them in 2, leaving half dangling from the gun and draping the other half over his shoulder. Tig knew that their goal was to save lives at the compound, but that wasn't foremost on his mind as he moved closer to their destination. His first thought was survival. With each football, his eyes darting left and right, he clutched his machine gun tighter. The former Marine replayed a single existential thought. Is somebody going to engage us? While Tig and Jack scaled the dirt mound, Ronan kept moving forward toward the gate. He hunched down behind one of the concrete traffic barriers to the right of the compound entrance, waiting for his partners. Ronan radioed Tonto and DB to say they'd reached their gate and were getting ready to move in. First to join Roan was the 3 militiamen, who took cover positions beside the barriers. Before them stood a concrete archway, some 20 feet wide and 15 feet high, painted a friendly shade of pale yellow. Deep inside the archway were the compound's heavy gates. There, wrought iron balusters backed by solid steel plates to prevent anyone from ramming them open, climbing over, or shooting through. Normally closed, except when vehicles entered or exited. The gates were thrown wide open. Someone had taken the time to latch the bottom of the gates to fixed anchors in the driveway to keep them from swinging closed. Also open was the adjacent steel pedestrian gate. When Jack reached the Jersey barriers, he noticed that one of the militiamen crouching nearby had not only an AK-47, but also a rocket-propelled grenade launcher strapped across his back. Jack momentarily worried that the man might be a threat to Roan, so Jack watched him, gun up, ready to shoot if the militiaman aimed his gun in Roan's direction. The militiaman showed no signs of being a threat, so Jack concluded that he must be one of the good guys. Jack scuttled forward, dropped in, and kneeled to the man's left. 6 inches separated their shoulders as they looked toward the gate. A few yards away, Tig continued to struggle with the ammunition for his belt-fed machine gun. He fought to get his second drum out of an improvised canvas pouch. Tig wanted the drum clipped securely in place on the weapon, so he wouldn't run out of rounds when the shooting started. He radioed the annex. We're moving into the compound. Roan took Tig's radio call as a signal. Without warning his companions, he sprang to his feet and quick-stepped around the concrete barrier. Roan rounded a corner of low hedges and ran headlong through the gate into the compound, his assault rifle pointing the way forward. Jack had expected that they'd make eye contact or otherwise communicate before moving. But when he saw Roan move, his training kicked into gear. Excuse me. A bedrock rule among SEALs and other special operations fighters is that no one goes it alone, ever, regardless of whether you're entering a room or an open space. Roan had been trained the same way, so Jack knew that when he led the charge, Roan felt confident that Jack and Tig would have his back. Jack popped up, stepped around the barrier, and sprinted into the compound. Tig was wrestling with his weapon when Roan and Jack moved. He was on his feet seconds later, but that was just enough time for someone to begin shooting at him from further east down the gravel road. The shots came from an intersection with a street the operators called Adidas Road because of a sporting goods store that was located there. Tig dropped flat onto the ground behind a barrier as the round zipped above his head. He pressed the talk button on his radio. "Hey, base, I'm taking fire, but I'm not hit. Pinned down." Tig looked up and saw flashes of gunfire passing over him. One of the 17 Feb militiamen jumped to his feet about 10 feet to Tig's left. He let loose with his AK-47 on full automatic, firing in bursts at a rate of 600 rounds per minute. His magazine spent, the militiaman dropped down to reload. Tig pulled his night vision goggles down over his eyes and stepped into the fight. He brought up a fully loaded machine gun resting at the top of the barrier. And as Tig prepared to fire, the unarmed man rushed toward him, hands raised from the darkened street. "Friendly, friendly! 7 February. Still ready to blast away, Tig caught the eye of the militiaman reloading his AK. "Friendly," the unarmed man yelled again. 17 Feb. Tig and the armed militiaman exchanged quizzical looks that Tig translated into universal soldier language. "Who the fuck is this nut?" Tig exhaled. Whoever had been firing at them from up the street had ran off. or was dead or wounded from the AK barrage. Either way, the incoming gunfire had stopped. Tig pointed two fingers to his eyes, pantomiming to the armed militiamen to keep watch on the new arrival. The militiamen nodded. Tig rose, his machine gun up and ready. He sprinted into the compound to catch up with Roan and Jack. DB took the lead as the sniper observer team approached the 8-foot wall near the corner of Gunfighter Road and the gravel road leading to the compound. He climbed over, then dropped to one knee to provide cover for two 17th Fed militiamen and filing Tonto as they joined him on the other side. Ahead was the tall building they'd hoped to use as their perch. But before they moved that way, they wanted to make sure no one was waiting to ambush them. Next door to their chosen building was a cinder block house, under construction. Tonto provided cover while DB and the two militiamen made sure it was empty. Then the trio returned. The squad moved toward the tall building, but as they got closer, Tonto and DB realized that even if they reached the top, they'd be too far from the compound to see much. They changed plans and kept going. One taking a knee as the other reached cover, then moving again, using the property walls as shields as they hopscotched steadily from one lot to the next. Each time they'd reached a corner they couldn't see beyond, Tonto or DB used a technical technique called slicing the pie, or pie in the corner. The lead man approached the corner close to the wall. A few feet from the corner, he took small sideways steps away from the wall with his gun up and ready. With each outward step, he cleared a slice of the dark area on the other side of the corner, allowing him incrementally to determine that no one was there, without exposing himself all at once. As Tonto held one corner, he heard the radio call from Roan, asking whether it looked safe for the operators to move up the gravel road. After telling Roan that he couldn't see but didn't hear any gunfire, Tonto moved ahead to the next corner. They made their way from one lot to the next, studying the shadows and the unlit passageways to see if anyone was hiding. Like their fellow operators on the street, they expected gunfire in their direction at any moment. The two operators and their militiamen, Shadows, tried to remain quiet and unobserved, not knowing whether a large force of attackers was waiting to engage them at the next lot or on the far side of the compound. Yet as they balanced, moving fast against remaining safe, they found themselves cheating towards speed because they knew Americans were in danger inside the compound. As they led their team down the block, Tonto and DB realized that most of the buildings were single-story homes, that they wouldn't do them any good as sniper observation towers. But through their goggles, they saw a building under construction 100 yards ahead from that might work. "Let's get on top of that and see what we can see," DB said. They moved into the tall, unlit building with care, clearing each floor and the stairwells as they went. Their breathing grew heavier. Sweat soaked the operators' shirts under their body armor. The machine gun on Tonto's arms and the assault rifle slung over his back seemed to be gaining weight. He went up the stairs first, climbing carefully toward the unfinished fourth floor. And at the top, Tonto stepped out and saw a bird's eye view. At once, spectacular and horrifying flames engulfed the 17 February barracks near the compound front gate. The main villa was ablaze with orange sparks rising into the inky Mediterranean sky. Black smoke curled and swirled from the buildings, cloaking the silvery stars above. Under different circumstances, Tonto might have called it strangely beautiful. He shifted his attention from the view to his radio, realizing that he hadn't heard any recent calls from the compound. Tonto wondered if the Americans were still alive. The fourth floor view was arresting but frustrating. A row of trees obscured any movement on the compound grounds, making it impossible for them to establish a sniper or reconnaissance position. DB reached the top floor and stood alongside Tonto. "This is worthless," he said. They headed back down, rejoined the 17th Feb guys, and kept moving. The four-man squad jackrabbited across an open field of dirt and weeds, climbed over a wall, then repeated the process with another barren field and another wall. Then repeated the process with another barrier field. Their travels took them to yet another wall, this one running perpendicular to the wall that enclosed the west side of the compound. DB threw over a go bag containing his medical kit, extra ammunition, and his GPS unit, intending to climb after it. Tig's low voice came over the radio. "We're moving onto the compound." "Roger that," Tonto replied in a whisper. "We still haven't gotten there. We're trying to meet you guys there." DB and Tonto climbed the wall perpendicular to the compound. When they reached the top, they realized that they still couldn't see into the grounds. That meant there was no point for them to drop over the other side. A better plan, they agreed, would be to work their way around to the south side of the compound and see if they could enter through the rear B1 gate, which opened out to the Fourth Ring Road. The burning villa was toward the front of the compound. By approaching from the rear, Tonto, DB, and the militiamen conceivably could ambush any attackers driven to the gate by Rome, Tig, and Jack. As Tonto started to climb down, part of the wall collapsed beneath him. He slammed to the ground, scraping and badly bruising his left leg. Blood oozed from the cuts and scrapes on his left arm. DB jumped down from the wall. He and one of the 17th Feb militiamen rushed over. "Damn," DB said. "You okay?" "Yeah," Tonto said. His leg hurting, but nothing broken. "I'm fine. We gotta go." DB looked back at the wall. "Ah, shit, my bag." They'd already suffered too many delays, first at the annex, now as they tried to reach the compound. The radios were silent. That couldn't mean good news. Climbing over a half-crumpled wall to search for DB's bag in the dark would cost more time. Time that meant lives. "Dude," Tonto said, "fuck it, I got extra mags." And DB knew he was right. They rushed toward the Fourth Ring Road as they ran side by side, huffing and puffing. DB caught Tonto's eye and smiled. "This sucks," DB said. Too winded to answer, Tonto returned the grin. After clearing another wall, they found themselves near a grocery store about 50 yards from the compound's back gate. A dozen or so bystanders stood outside the store, looking toward the fires inside the compound. Tonto told their two 17th Feb militia companions to watch the crowd as he and DB went to the gate. And as they moved away from the store, Tonto and DB came face to face with a 17th Feb commander talking on a telephone in Arabic. It wasn't clear how the militia leader had arrived at their location, but Tonto thought the two militiamen they'd brought with them must have called him on their radios. "Hey, dude," Tonto said, pointing toward the grocery store onlookers. "Are those your guys? Are they friendly?" "No, they aren't," the commander said in English. "Well, so make sure they don't shoot us," Tonto said. "If they do, kill them." The militia commander nodded as he continued talking on the phone. As Tonto headed toward the gate, he mumbled under his breath to DB. Man, I wish I could understand Arabic better. I got a gut feeling he's talking to the bad guys, telling them we're coming in. More than 40 minutes had elapsed since DS agent Alec Henderson pressed the duck and cover alarm at the sight and sounds of armed attackers pouring into the compound. During that time, an alert about the ongoing attack had gone out from the State Department's Diplomatic Security Command Center, informing the White House, Situation Room, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and the FBI, according to an official Defense Department timeline. In response to that alert, at 10:32 p.m. Benghazi time, or 4:32 p.m. in Washington, the National Military Command Center at the Pentagon notified the Office of Secretary of Defense. Word quickly reached Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and General Martin Dempsey, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Panetta and Dempsey had a previously scheduled meeting with President Obama within a half hour at 5 p.m. Washington time, or 11 p.m. Benghazi time. There, Panetta testified later, they discussed potential responses. Panetta told the Congressional Committee that Obama ordered the Defense Department to respond with all available DoD assets. Panetta testified that he didn't speak directly with the president again on September 11th. Meanwhile, according to a letter the White House sent to Republicans on the Senate Armed Services Committee at Obama's request, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called Libyan President Mohammed Maghreb to coordinate additional support to protect Americans in Libya and access to Libyan territory. Maghreb pledged full cooperation, the letter said. As military options remained under discussion, the unarmed U.S. surveillance drone neared Libyan airspace over Benghazi to provide live video images of the burning compound. But at the 10:30 p.m. Benghazi time, the drone remained more than a half hour away. As the GRS operators moved inside the compound walls, they did so blind. As the attack continued, Panetta later testified to Congress. 2 Marine security platoons stationed in Spain were ordered to prepare for deployment. One to Benghazi and the other to Tripoli. A special operations force in the midst of a training exercise in Central Europe was ordered to prepare to deploy to a staging base in Southern Europe. A U.S.-based special operations team was told to get ready to travel to the same staging base. But in the end, none of them were sent to Benghazi. Panetta said consideration was also given to sending armed aircraft, along with refueling tankers and other support. But he added, it would have taken at least 9 hours for them to get there. Panetta described it as a problem of distance and time. Embassy officials in Tripoli took part in those discussions. Gregory Hicks, the embassy's deputy chief, testified to Congress that the embassy's defense attaché talked with officials at AFRICOM and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Hicks said he asked for the defense attaché, is anything coming? Will they be sending us any help? Is there something out there? Hicks testified that he was told that the nearest help was at the U.S. Air Base in Aviano, Italy, where Air Force fighter planes were 2 to 3 hours away. But no tankers were available for them to refuel. So hours longer would pass before any fighters could take off. And I said, thank you very much, Hicks testified. And he went on with our work. In the end, No American warplanes were sent to Benghazi. The nearest and most likely help from American ground forces remained the 7-man Tripoli-based GRS team, which included 2 active-duty Delta Force operators, former SEAL Glenn Doherty, known as Bub, and a linguist who'd act as a translator. As minutes passed and the compound burned, talk of response options and available assets continued in Washington, Tripoli, at AFRICOM headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany, and elsewhere. Later in the night, a global conference call would include representatives from AFRICOM, the European Command, the Central Command, the Special Operations Command, the Transportation Command, and the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. None of those discussions mattered to the operators already on the ground at Benghazi. The members of the annexed GRS security team had long since concluded that they couldn't wait for outside help. They couldn't wait for drones or gunships or Marines stationed in Spain. They couldn't wait for special ops teams in Central Europe or the United States, or even their fellow GRS operators and special ops soldiers en route from Tripoli. They couldn't wait for action by the presidents of the United States or Libya, or the secretaries of state or defense. They couldn't wait for the United Nations, the United States Army, Air Force, Marines, or Navy, the Libyan Air Force, or anyone else. The special mission compound in Benghazi was overrun. Buildings and cars were on fire. Armed enemies of the United States roamed freely inside the walls. Ambassador J. Christopher Stevens and communications expert Sean Smith were missing inside a burning villa. 5 other Americans were also in danger. For us, the only option was to act. At the annex, I prepared to withstand and repel a possible second wave. At the compound, Tonto and DB headed toward the back gate. Roan, Jack, and Tig rushed through the front gate. None of us had any idea what would happen next. Well, that concludes chapter 6. I want to thank everybody again for joining us tonight. I do want to give a shout out to all of those that have been supporting this, who have been sharing the advertisements to their with their people that are in their social media, getting this out. I really appreciate that. It means more than what that I can say, but I greatly appreciate it. So let me look into here and so this was a little bit shorter chapter, kind of sped through it. I maybe getting this reading thing down a little bit better. Being a Marine, I'm starting to learn to read. It's not all in crayon, but let's get to the questions. Tom asked, odd question, but who is responsible to ensure proper inventory for ammunition? And how were those shipped to provide to the team? It's not like FedEx or Amazon Prime is going to hand deliver. I appreciate you. Well, Tom, being Marines, 2 Navy SEALs, and Army Ranger, along with the CIA, we just make sure we get what we need there. Can't really go into a lot of the details on that, but just know that we were taken care of. We made sure that we had plenty of ammo there. I think what I remember the last count was we had roughly about 60,000 rounds of ammo. So, and I always say with 3 Marines and 60,000 rounds of ammo, Benghazi wasn't going to end very well for the bad guys. But in truth, 60,000 rounds 2 Navy SEALs, an Army Ranger, and 3 Marines, it was even worse. So thanks for that and appreciate your support. Angelo Lefter. Did the interpreter look like an Afghan Bob Newhart? Yes, he did. So he did look like an Afghan Bob Newhart, but he was really an American citizen that had that worked for the agency or for the U.S. government. Next, we have Tom Hinkle. Tom said, "I missed some." Mark, did any of you have a way to contact your family during this? Tom, no. I mean, we each had a cell phone and we each had our computers before we left out. But, with what we had to worry about, reaching our families and reaching out to them was probably the last thing that was on our minds. Because more important, what we had in front of us was far more important than that at that point in time. But thank you for that question. Bo Winter, will the government ever release the drone footage from that night? I don't know. I doubt it. I can say I did get to see it after I got out of the hospital in mid-October. I got to see some of it. It would be interesting and great to see. I don't know, maybe we ought to file a Freedom of Information Act and see if we could get that done. If nothing else, it would make for some good viewing. Bob Dickinson. Bob is back again. Thank you, Bob. In an area with these different factions, how do you build alliances with militias like 17 Feb? How much trust can you usually put in that? Honestly, from my point of view, if I haven't worked with them, I don't really put too much trust in them whatsoever. It's when you're in that kind of situation, you got to put a little bit of, you do got to put it in there a little bit, but you always, kind of that analogy, you always sleep with one eye open, no matter what you're doing. If you've got them with you and you haven't worked with them over a long period of time, you always got one eye on your sights and one eye on what they're doing as well. Next, we have Paul. Paul asks, Oz, you and the book mentioned that an ISR drone was overhead at some point. Did you guys on the ground ever get anything useful from it? Parentheses, if I can talk to that. Yeah, I can talk to that. And during when it initially showed up, we really didn't get much information from it. The only time I remember getting anything out of it was after the team had made their way back to the annex, and we were getting ready for the second firefight. Word came over. We had asked if there was any bad guys out there and if they were moving back up again, and they asked up the chain to the drone, and then we started getting into a firefight, and about halfway into that 15-20 minute firefight, they came across the radio and said, be aware that the ISR is indicating that you have unfriendlies coming up on your north and northeast flank. So, typical intelligence, a day late and a dollar short in my book. Next, we have Steve Barity. I noticed the team leader isn't really mentioned much in the book or movie. I have my thoughts why, but wanted to hear your thoughts. As always, thank you for your service. Our team leader at the time, biggest reason we didn't really mention him in the book was he's still working, and there was really no need to put that in there. I can tell you he didn't move down the he stayed back with the vehicles over at the consulate until Tonto and Tig, DB, Jack, and Roan secured the compound. then they came up with the vehicles after that, him and the interpreter, with one of the vehicles. And then when they did get back over to the annex, he took up his position by the front door while the rest of us got up on the rooftop to take care of business. And that's pretty much about all I got to say about that. Harmon is asking, hey, thanks for the questions. When did you come to Christ, and how was that helped you while being deployed and transitioning to home life? I was blessed, Harmon. I grew up in the Methodist church. I sang on the children's church, the children's choir, had a wonderful youth pastor and his wife that were very instrumental in giving me that foundation in my faith. But as all young men, I ain't going to say for all young men, but, as most of us young Marines, especially, being, cowboy and rodeo and then going in the Marine Corps, I followed the Lord in a way that worked for me. My left and right lateral limits were pretty wide. You got the straight and narrow. My life, at least leading up to Benghazi, pretty much kind of bounced across it. But I never forgot my faith and my trust in the Lord, knowing that he would always be there. And there were little things throughout my career in law enforcement, in the Marine Corps, where things would happen that would remind me that he's still there, that there's those little miracles that are there that happen when we if we open our eyes and look for him. As I say, post Benghazi is I'm a hard-headed, stubborn jarhead. It took getting shot at for 13 hours, blown up 3 times, and about dead before he's got my attention. And ever since, I'm going to live my life as he sees fit, as he wants me to, and through his strict guidance. But thank you for that question. Right, I'll go back to a little bit of that. You asked, how does that help being deployed and transitioning to home life? Being deployed, in my mind, anytime I deployed, if I wasn't going to come home, I was going to go home and be with the Lord. If I didn't go to the Lord, then I was going to come home and be with my family. And I couldn't ask for two outcomes that either would have been more than I deserved to get. And as for transitioning into home life, a lot of people talk about PTS. As I always tell people, it's not PTSD. It's not a disorder. It's just another injury to the brain. But I also firmly believe that if you don't work on your relationship and develop that relationship with the Lord, it's going to be a whole lot harder to struggle with overcoming that PTS. You got to start out, put your faith and love in the Lord, and understand that he is going to be there for you, and he is not going to give you anything more than what you can handle. Moving on. Chad Shockey. Chad asks, Jack seems to have gone dark. Do you keep in touch with him, and how's he doing? Each one of us had to choose how we were going to go along after the movie and the book. And Jack, he just chose for a less visible lifestyle and didn't need or want the notoriety or the accolades that for his family, didn't want to put them through any more of that. So he's kind of just stayed off into, I guess he's that guy that rode off into the twilight or into the sunset, as the old Western goes. But yeah, we do stay in touch. He's doing great. We all get together, at least on the phone, at least once a year. John. After being in the center of such a momentous event, after you got home and recovered, is there a moment where you missed the intensity any meaningfulness of that time in your life? Or are you glad to have that part of your life done? Um, I don't know. I should ask my wife what she thinks. But no, for me, a little part of me always wants that. It's that sense of being a part of something bigger. But for me and for my wife, um, our way of doing and staying into that is one of the big reasons why we started Shadow Warriors Project. And we did that because it's our way of still continuing to serve and take care of our brothers and our sisters, both veterans that are and those that are contractors still serving overseas. Um, Being that voice for those who can't have that voice because of their contracts, because of their secrecy. They deserve that. They need that, and their families need to be taken care of. And that's the reason, the primary reason why we chose to continue our service, and in doing that, and that is, in all honesty, that has really fulfilled that sense of service, of unselfishness that you get when you are working overseas. But thank you for that question. John, John Nepper, did you guys work for Blackwater? We were not working for, none of us were working for Blackwater at the time, but I know Tig, Tonto, and DB, both, all three of them, at some point in their career worked for Blackwater. I myself never did. I worked for some other companies, and I don't know. I don't believe Roan or Jack either worked for Blackwater as well, but I could be mistaken in that. Hmm. Next is Jason Schmidt. In Smuggler's Alley, did they have a big V bid where they were setting up? And was the station chief a big tool at the time as portrayed? The big V bid that they showed in the movie was not in the book. It was not part of what actually happened that night. That was something that was a liberty taken for creativeness by the director. Um, and we did question that. We did ask about that, why he was doing that, because we figured that like for us, there had been plenty of excitement for the whole night, but for him and the way he explained it was, if the second firefight ended as benign as the first, you're really not keeping that anticipation for what's coming next up. So by putting that bus bomb in there, that V bit in there, it was a way to, from a psychological standpoint, from a theatrical standpoint, of, as Michael Bay said, keeping people's butts in their seats. Because when you see that happen, and subconsciously in your mind, you're sitting there thinking, if this is what happened now, we know it gets worse. Now, how bad can it be getting? But thanks for that question, Jason. Very good one. Mary Beth. Mary Beth asks, will you be on the 2020 campaign trail for President Trump? All President Trump has to do is ask, and I'll be there. I can tell you that. At this point in time in our country's existence, we are facing, in my opinion, some trying times, some challenging times. We are having people who are, it's ironic that we have governors and mayors and other Democrat lefties who are in power, who have been voted into power, who have been complaining and worrying about President Trump taking over and being that king, or so to speak, that dictator. But their true colors have really been shown, in my opinion, and I'm sure I'm going to piss a bunch of people off with this, but I don't care. As you know, um, we live in America, and we are on free. We are free. Freedom is what makes us that. What I've always been asking over the last few months is, since when has personal responsibility gotten thrown out, and our politicians, especially our Democratic brothers and sisters, think that they have to dictate how we, that they know better than us, and that they are the ones that are going to be um, able to tell us how to be safe and how to not put ourselves in danger. You know, I think this whole quarantine thing has gotten way blown out of proportion. And if I go to a restaurant and there's too many people in there that makes me uncomfortable, guess what? I have the ability to make that decision to either stay or go. If I'm in there and a bunch of people come in, I can get my butt up and leave if I don't like that. I don't want to put myself in that situation. And that's where I ask, since when did we get rid of personal responsibility? When did people quit taking and thinking for themselves and letting and being the sheep that the left wants us to be, that our politicians that are in the swamp want? Kind of getting on my soapbox here, but it's really been irritating the crap out of me. I think some of our governors, our governor here in Colorado, Governor Polis, I think he's forgotten how a law gets put into effect. He says that wearing a mask is a law. Well, it's not a law. It's just your order, and your order is nothing but a suggestion. For it to become a law, somebody within the legislature has to introduce it as a bill, and it has to go to committee, and it has to be debated at committee, and then taken to the floor of one side of the legislature, and then voted on. And should it pass, it goes to the other side, and the other side puts it under committee, and then takes it to the floor. And should it then be changed, it has to go back to the other side and re-evaluated and re-debated. If it doesn't get changed from one side or the other, then it goes to the governor, and only then can he sign it in to make it a law. And only then can that law can our law enforcement then be asked to enforce that. Anything outside of that is a violation of your civil liberties and your constitutional rights. And me personally, I'm not going to put up with it. I'm not going to listen to them. I'm sure somebody's going to be knocking on my door later today, but so be it. I'll get off my soapbox on that right now, but I fought too hard, too long, seen too many friends die for the Constitution. Our law enforcement who are out there, understand that it's your job to uphold that Constitution before it is to worry about your job. It is your job to adhere to what the Constitution says, and that is not following an unlawful order by somebody who is elected to a position where they think they now are a dictator. But again, I apologize for getting off on that, and for those of you out there that I pissed off, get over it. I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry, but get over it anyways. My wife is asking, remember when you just got home from Benghazi and you were still in a cast and you wanted to go hunt down rhino poachers in Africa? No, honey, I forgot about that. But yeah, she's right. And most of that is, it's my way of wanting to help those that can't help for themselves. There's bad people in the world that need to be taken out. Sometimes they need to be convinced to come to the other side. They need to be led gently to the Lord and to Jesus Christ. And some of them who are a little bit hard-headed and don't like that need to be brought there forcibly and let them understand what they're facing. Ivy Schaefer, thanks for joining us, Ivy. Ivy is asking, how is my arm doing? My arm's it's doing as good as I can expect. It's attached. It's my arm. Thank goodness the doctors, both those that helped save it in Benghazi, in Tripoli, and those in Germany and in Walter Reed, and those here at the Air Force Academy, all of them that did such a wonderful job not only the doctors, but the nurses, the physical therapists that were instrumental in making sure that I got to keep that, because had it not been mine, I think it'd be a lot worse without it than, even with the wonderful prosthetics that they have this day and age, it being mine, it's mine. So thank you for that, Ivy, and thanks for your concern. Next, we have Jason Schmidt. Oz, does Shadow Warriors have apparel, and what not? Maybe that's why not. If we don't, or I would like to do my part and support you guys and spread your message. We have an order of shirts that are in with Nine Line, and it's been delayed a little bit because of the COVID virus and the quarantine and all of that. But they will be up on our webpage. And as I announced at the very beginning, I want to say it again, is we are going to have a shirt that's going to be coming out here shortly. I'll be able to announce on Facebook, on social media, on our webpage, on Twitter, Instagram, all of those, on LinkedIn, when that will be available. But all the proceeds all the profits from that shirt will be going directly to Shadow Warriors. So anybody out there who wants to support us, get on there, buy the shirts, and all those proceeds are going to be going to Shadow Warriors. You're going to be helping as many people as possible. We are also going to be having the books up on our store that we are going to have in place. Should be by Monday, that store will be up, and we'll get those out there so you guys can start ordering on that as well. If you are also wanting to, other ways that you can help is click on the donate button that is on ShadowWarriorsProject.org website and make your donation as much as you can. Again, to reiterate, anybody, the first 1,000 people who do a reoccurring donation for this year for $20 will get a free autographed book of 13 hours by myself. So please get out there, make that donation. We'll get those books sent out to you. But God bless you all. I think that's the end of the questions, unless something else just popped up here at the last. Yeah, I think that's it. I thank you all for joining me on a Friday night. Those of you who are going to be viewing this over the next few days and over the weekend, God bless you. Thanks for your support. Thanks for just coming out and joining us. And, you're in our prayers. I hope you're all healthy. I hope you're being strong. You're staying strong, and you're taking this time to spend that time with our loved ones. I was blessed last night. My little daughter wanted to go camping for the first time outside. So we were able to set up the tent in the backyard last night and spend the night under the stars. It really warmed my heart that she wanted to do that. And, it's been kind of hard over the years doing things like that with my older kids just because I was gone so much. So I'm really taking a lot of time here with this quarantine, spending more time with family, with my loved ones, building those stronger relationships, and making sure that we're taking care of each other so we can take care of those that are less fortunate than ourselves. So God bless you all. Thank you so much. And looking forward to seeing everybody. Please share. Tell all your friends that we're going to be back here Wednesday night again at same time, same bat time, same bat channel, 7 o'clock p.m. Wednesday night, and that's 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So God bless you all again. Thank you very much, and we'll see you Wednesday night. Out.